So maybe just as a first of all question, I mean, you are, platinum sponsors, so it's a big commitment for you to be here, and welcome to the MVNO world. I think, is this one of your first sessions in this is a new event, of course, in itself, but I was just wondering, to that extent, you've obviously committed to the market, and so the first question I just wanted to ask you was, you seem to have an interesting background and platform. You and I, we all spoke beforehand, and so you've come up with a new idea or a new platform, or maybe it's also deployed. But maybe you can tell me a bit more about what Full Circle is about. Maybe Rajesh, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So we've sort of worked in the telecom space for roughly 20 years as Tauspace.
Yeah.
We started out in advisory services, kind of, the early 2000s when the mobile operators were taking off. And in a lot of those engagements, what we found is that, for emerging markets, and specifically the African continent, the price point of a traditional tier 1 stack made absolutely no sense.
Right.
So, we were doing advisory work all across the continent, and you start to see this. And that in itself was an opportunity for us. So, and what we looked at is a couple of different dimensions here. One dimension was cost. The second dimension was, overall complexity. So a typical CIO, CTO didn't want to go and cherry pick 4 or 5 different things and then integrate it and then continuously pay that integration tax forward. So we thought, okay, let's find a single box solution. It doesn't have to have every single bell and whistle, but it needs to meet 80 to 90% of what you're looking for, and then give them that at a compelling price, and then develop a partnership with that operator to help them grow, help them use the platform, help them build their customer base. And that's really, where we built Full Circle. That's kind of its origin story. And so we did that in about 2007.
Okay.
And we've evolved our commercial model since then. And I think right now it puts us in really good position because we know we're one of the market leaders in working with real-time charging of 5G standalone.
Right. And from your perspective, the Full Circle strategy perspective as to how you're, as you say, you're rightly saying about you learned by fixing and seeing the problems the customers were having on the one side, but from a strategic perspective.
From a strategic perspective, and thank you very much for that. What we've done is that we've looked at the market from a fairly wide perspective. We would have wanted to leverage off our African roots that gives us a sort of fair entry into the sort of problems that the world is facing today, the cost of living crisis. In Africa, we call it life. So that has always been what's been guiding us for the 20 plus years. The solution has to be in that respect. Then we had to leverage off our fairly wide experience within the telecom sector to a point that if today myself or Rajesh were not selling the platform, we would be advising C-suites in any telecom network in the world, and they would listen. Okay, most of the time.
Okay.
So that is our second area from a strategic perspective that we bring, is that domain knowledge of the telecoms market. And the third aspect of it is the agility of the platform that suits people who are more innovators, or as I used yesterday, the acronym of IDEA. We were innovators, disruptors, entrepreneurs, and accelerators, who are pretty much the sort of people that are in there. And that is the fit that we saw when we decided to approach this group of people.
So it sounds like to me you're solving real problems that the customers have, operators as well. But maybe you can come back to the term Full Circle. Is it to do with life cycle management or something like that?
Interesting. So sort of there. Sort of 10-ish years ago, there was this, or maybe even a little earlier than that, operators really wanted to have what they called a 360-degree view of their customers. So they wanted to be able to see in a single kind of window to a single agent. I want to be able to see everything about this customer, every interaction, every notification I've sent him, every bill, every time they've interacted with us. And from day one, we thought, okay, we're building something new. let's make that one of the key things that it solves for. So when an agent logs in, or if a customer logs into their self-care portal, they have this complete view of their engagement, with the person providing them that service. And that's where full circle comes from.
So, I mean, it seems to be a sort of single platform, and with integrated applications. So, what would you say are its sort of advantages?
Okay, so I think we actually have a little bit of a picture here.
Okay.
I think it's one.
If you
more,
want to stand up and
one more forward. Yeah, let's try and stand.
Okay.
One more forward. So, sorry for the small writing. It's hard to see, but there's different bits and pieces that we try and solve when we're trying to deliver a service to a customer. And this picture really shows customers, the extent of what we provide. But in principle, there's two pieces to this entire puzzle. And if I try to think of this from an MVNO point of view, you would have what is a thick or a thin MVNO.
Right.
It's a common terminology. The top part, typically a thin MVNO would use a fair chunk of that because it involves the acquisition cycle. And you really want to make, everybody talks about going digital, you want to make it zero touch. You want to really remove the friction in terms of acquiring customers. And in principle, that's the entire sale and customer aspect management there. The second bit is something we call Full Circle 1, which is kind of where we come from a network engineering point of view. It's all the bits and pieces that we use to actually abstract the carrier network, from the way you create a service to the way you charge it. And we do this seamlessly, right? Now, typically, as I was saying, if we dealt with the CTO a few years ago, he'd buy a product for that, he'd probably buy another product for that, and another product for that. And what that does is, it changes how they have to go to market. So you've got to now take these four things. I think that there was a chat earlier about how you've got four vendors that start to point at each other. It's not my fault. So you basically, the ownership and responsibility becomes tricky. So when we do something like this bit understands how that bit talks about a customer, or how it talks about a product or a service or a tariff. So it makes the ability to orchestrate a new product, to put a new offer together fairly simplistic, because from the point you touch that customer on his phone, on an app, all the way to the point that we deliver it as an actual service on the network, it's fairly seamless and it's integrated.
Yeah, so I think that's a very sort of comprehensive diagram. I think it takes a minute to digest it. But I think that's what you were saying initially. It's really about, it's already pre-integrated, and from the user perspective, or let's say the operator perspective, they can seamlessly provision and create the packages, but all the way through to provisioning in one platform where all the data models are all the same. As you say, if you start working with different systems, there'll be different data models. There's a lot of, I think, integration to be done.
Yeah, so, and that's really one of the key problems that we try to solve by doing that.
Okay. So why do you market Full Circles, convergent, hybrid, and unified?
Okay.
Do you want to maybe?
That's right.
Okay, so again, so a lot of these things are historic, right? There's been, when we talk about convergent, when telco services started in sort of the late 90s, or mobile service really, everything was postpaid. So you would at that point, pay after you use the service. And then sort of in the early 2000s, it became prepaid. You had these postpaid billing platforms, and then you had these prepaid billing platforms. At some point, you had to mix the two together, and then we threw real-time billing into that equation.
Yeah.
Very often,
evolution of the industry.
Precisely. And very often, what you had is you went to one vendor for the real-time charging, you went to another vendor for your postpaid billing, and you had to integrate them. So what we did is we do prepaid, we do postpaid, and we do real-time billing in one entire system. So that's the convergence.
Right.
And that's the hybrid aspect as well.
Right.
So what's the other one that you asked for?
It was convergent, hybrid, and unified.
So unified is interesting because we have a lot of experience with doing telco integration, because kind of that's where we started, was doing integration into this telecoms network. This bit here at the bottom with lots of tiny technical blocks in it talks to the actual network, and it doesn't necessarily talk only to a mobile network operator. So we can talk to a fiber provider, a Metro Ethernet or a SD-WAN provider, and what it allows us, it's it allows us to create very interesting mix of services. We can mix a value-added service from a third-party video provider. We can pair that with a bit of fiber. We can add a mobile service in there. So we create these very interesting mixes of different kinds of platforms. So it's a unified platform to manage any sort of network capability that you can buy from a NAS provider going forward.
Okay. I just want to come back to the title as well, because I think that's an important point, because we talk about enterprise in the title and 5G.
Yep.
Now, I think it was mentioned the other day, people were saying, well, 5G isn't real yet, isn't launched yet. But can you share a bit of experience about what you're doing in the 5G space?
So interestingly enough, in South Africa, we had the opportunity to be probably one of the first outside China to start rolling out pure play 5G, which is 5G standalone. And one of our customers in the South African market is probably one of the market leaders in standalone 5G. And in their environment, we make use of Full Circle 1 to deal with real-time charging, real-time rating, and service management and policy control for 5G standalone services. And they're a bit different to the way you do it in 4G. And because we've been doing this for 4G in the past, and now we're doing it for 5G, again, it plays to that concept of being unified, where we can manage a pretty interesting mix of things in one platform.
And can you share us, it's not something that's been launched a few weeks ago. I think this is for a while, right? And you've got a substantial subscriber base. Obviously, you can't share the customer, but I think it's also, the size is quite relevant, right?
So it's not small. They're reasonably, customer base. We're not talking small amounts here. We can't do the numbers, but we've been doing this for over 2 years, or almost 2 years, really.
Right.
So it's not something that we just started doing. And when you start doing this when there's no reference model for doing it, and you're one of the first guys doing it, there's a lot of teething problems, and we've been through that. And I think it's been a good experience.
Ndirangu, I wanted to ask you a question related to that. How from the experience perspective, so you've been following and tracking the evolution of the operators, helping them, as you say, as they light up new services, you're able to support them and extended your platform to do that. Yeah. But have you got any sort of strategy suggestions as to how people deal with the move from 4G to 5G?
Actually, we did deal with that part of that from yesterday's sessions. Yeah. But to my pleasant surprise, there was a gentleman from Vienna who gave a presentation, just the one before Haljot. And he came from the tourism industry. And what he was saying is that one of the things that he's trying to do is use of augmented virtual reality. Right. And his biggest challenge at the moment is the network itself. The 5G networks in Europe are not ready for prime time as far as is concerned.
Right.
But, that to me is a very encouraging sign that let's get the network in order. Right. The opportunities will follow. They may not follow from the networks themselves, but they're going to follow from these folks that I've called IDEA.
Right.
And the gentleman from Vienna, I think he has left, but he's certainly one of those. So the thing about it is, number one, the big MNOs have no choice. They will have to migrate from 4G to 5G for the simple reason that there's parity play. But there's an advantage to that, is that once you've been able to put up a 5G network as part of your parity play, then that gives you the advantages of lower delivery cost of per gigabyte delivery. It's much lower at 5G than 4G. So it's in your interest as an operator, once you've got these sunk costs, it's in your interest to start leveraging off that. But what, as the MVNO community, we could help here is put up similar cases like the one that we just seen from the tourism sector. And the minute the MNOs see the advantages to that, that yes, there's a whole community out there to develop, out there willing to develop and monetize those sort of ideas. And, we've got a very good example there. then it gives him the incentive to see, look, there's money to be had here. And in any case, we got the network, probably needs a bit of probably migration from one release of the 5G to the next release to the next release to potentially the standalone one, which is the Rolls-Royce of, you would say, of the 5G. But I think it's almost like a chicken and an egg story whereby the MNOs are looking at the community of innovators, and the community of innovators, at least in one occasion, are pointing out that the network is yet ready.
Yeah, there's a challenge.
Yeah.
And so I think obviously the audience for you are potential customers that might want to use the model. How can you make it easier for them to engage with you, and how can you help them innovate?
Okay. I'll start with it. Kibata can probably add on it. When we started building a platform, one of the key things we had to try and understand is a commercial model that makes sense for what was the African market. So it needed to be priced appropriately, and that lends itself, to MVNOs, because again, you've got tight boundaries to work within from a commercial perspective. So there's a commercial model that works from a pricing point of view off the hat. The second thing we have to look at is saying these systems are, they're not heavily capex driven. They're driven more by a pay-as-you-grow kind of model. So you start small and you start to grow with the MVNO or the operator that we're partnering with. So as you grow, we have to grow with you in that environment, and that's only when we start actually generating revenue. So it's in our interest to make sure that we support our customers and our clients so that they actually grow. And the way we do that is twofold. The first one is we start, agility is exceptionally important. We need to be able to help them innovate and help to get products to market faster.
Yeah,
that's critical. Gone are the days when you can come up with a product, go to a 3-week development cycle, then decide what it should look like, and then take it to market. We need to be able to get a product out very quickly. If we're talking to a client, we need to understand, this is kind of what I want to do. This is and within a day or two, we need an MVP out and then start commercializing it. And guess what? Not all of them are going to work. But unfortunately, that road is a tricky one. Every single one's not going to be successful, but you need to do a lot of them to test the market. Right. And internet companies do this brilliantly. Yeah. We just don't see that in the telecom.
Don't we, in the telco space? Yeah.
We don't see it in the telco sector. And we have to experiment, because if we're trying to innovate and change, what the end state is, the current base is actually not where we should, we need to evolve from that. And that's really how we tend to help our clients.
So just one more comment, if I may, and then I'll give you the last words.
I was also going to look at it from the MNO perspective.
Okay.
So that is better from the MVNO perspective. Yeah. But we work for both parties, and they have to work optimally. And one potential strategy play for the MNO is a complete separation of their consumer business from enterprise business from our platform perspective. Yeah. And right now, there's a fair amount of separation in most of the MNOs that we have had a chance to speak to. But potentially, one of the ways that they could do is separate the MVNO, the platform, from the one that they use, which would tend to be much more expensive. Yeah. And I would say probably not as agile, and for a very good reason that they're coming from that heavy engineering background where they don't want to be changing things every afternoon. No. Then they would run what I would say the next generation BSS, for example, like ours, side by side, which is at a lower price point for these guys. Okay. Then it gives these guys the ability, number one, to prototype their MVP at a very low cost, or almost for zero. And so therefore the cost of failure becomes zero. That means increased innovation. Yep. And then increased innovations means more revenue for the operator, for the MVNO, and obviously yourselves.
Yeah. It is a strategy that MNOs use MVNOs to test markets as well. Yeah. But I think we're getting close to the end of the time. I just to make sure the room is aware of it. As you say, this platform is suitable for MNOs, as you just rightly said, who also have multi-tenanted functionality. Yeah. as well as, of course, if there was an MVNO who just needs a platform and wants to become like an MVNO type of thing.
Yep.
We love our acronyms in this industry.
We do.
That's also useful. And you're here for the rest of the day?
Yeah, we're leaving tomorrow.
Okay, so anyone wants to have a chat, it sounds very interesting. And thank you very much for your time.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ian.